This evening, the 5th and 6th graders from Holy Family Faith Formation Program will be presenting the Good Samaritan. Imagine Jesus on his way to ancient Jerusalem. The warm light of the sun falls on worn cobblestones. In this setting, a scholar of the law, a man deeply learned and proud of his knowledge, stands before Jesus. He wants to test Jesus. With a respectful yet testing tone, he asks, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus looks at the man and replies, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" The scholar answers confidently, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." Jesus smiles and affirms, "You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live." Yet, seeking to justify himself further, the scholar asks, "And who is my neighbor?"
I ask, who is my neighbor? Because I have long wondered about the limits of my obligation. Who am I morally bound to help? I believe that a neighbor is someone who shares my faith, my customs, a fellow believer. I challenge you, teacher, to define for me if love is confined by boundaries. I expected you might say, only your friends, those who mirror your own life. But instead, you call me to a radical, unbounded love. I think I know all about God and his law. I know my obligations. You said I am to love my neighbor as myself. Who is my neighbor? Who must I care for?
Now, picture a lonely road stretching from Jerusalem to Jericho. A solitary traveler, weary from his journey, makes his way along the path. Without warning, a band of ruthless robbers emerges from the shadows. In a flash, they descend upon him, stripping him of his meager belongings, beating him savagely, and leaving him bruised and half dead on the dusty roadside. The cruel laughter of the robbers fades into the distance. Leaving behind a man broken, not only in body, but in hope.
I did what I had to do. Out there, I saw a man alone and vulnerable, an easy mark. In this unforgiving world, you seize what you can when you can. I cared nothing for his suffering because, frankly, people like him are too weak, too inconsequential. In my eyes, he was merely an object, an opportunity. This is survival, plain and simple. Only the strong survive. I have to take care of myself.
I was just traveling to Jericho. I was not hurting anyone. I was caught unaware. Now I lie here, battered and abandoned. The pain is unbearable. Each moment drags me closer to despair. I can't move. I hope someone would stop, that a kind soul would show mercy. But as passerby ignored me, I began to wonder, am I not worth saving? I have hope deep within me, though my body fails, praying that someone will come. Someone will see me not as a burden, but as a fellow child of God.
Shortly after, a priest, dressed in humble robes and symbols of his sacred office, appears on the scene. Yet, when he sees the wounded man lying in desperate need, his face hardens. With his mind fixed on ritual purity and the demands of his calling, he crosses to the opposite side of the road. I have my duties in the temple. I must be ritually pure. He may be dead, so I must avoid him. His eyes betray a conflict. Duty to sacred law versus the call to compassion. But ultimately, he makes his choice and abandons the man.
I must confess my actions weigh on me. When I saw the man, I feared that touching him would render me unclean, and thus unfit to serve at the temple. My sacred duties and purity laws bind me tightly. I had pressing obligations, and I reasoned that perhaps someone else, unburdened by these restrictions, would offer the help I could not. It was not that I lacked faith, it was the weight of ritual law that kept me from stepping forward. At least that is my excuse not to help.
Not long after, a Levite, whose duties were to support the sacred rituals and maintain the purity of the temple service, came upon the wounded man. Like the priest, his heart was torn between the urge to help and a deep-seated fear. Caught in the grip of self-preservation, he too chose to pass by on the opposite side of the road. His silence a stark testament to human weakness. In the end, he didn't care.
In the moment, I felt the pull to help, but my fear won out. I worried about the danger. What if the robbers were still lurking nearby? What if, by stopping, I too would fall victim? I hesitated, paralyzed by the thought of harm coming my way. I know I should have acted, but I was afraid. I was in a hurry. Someone else will help. I can't think of a lot of reasons not to help, but in the end, they are excuses. In the end, I don't want help. It would be a bother to me.
Then a Samaritan traveler enters our story. We remember that the Samaritans and the Jews were bitter enemies. When we say Samaritan, we think of someone who was the enemy, someone at odds with the Jews. Yet, when he sees the wounded man, his heart is moved with profound compassion. Ignoring ancient prejudices, he rushes to the victim's side. With gentle hands, he pours oil and wine over the battered wounds, carefully bandaging them. Lifting the man, he carries him to an inn, devoting himself to caring for him. In his actions, we see mercy triumph over hatred. We witness someone who is a living example of a true neighbor. The following day, the Samaritan went to an inn and took further steps.
I've come from a people that history tells us that should despise Jews. Yet I cannot live by hate when faced with suffering. I have known exclusion and loneliness. Yet I have not to refuse to let another soul share that fate. When I saw that wounded man, I did not see an enemy or a stranger. I saw a human being made in the image and likeness of God. I could not ignore his pain. Compassion, to me, is more important than old grudges. I saw an image of God. I acted because I believe every person is worthy of mercy, regardless of their background.
The following day, the Samaritan went to an inn. and took further steps to ensure the wounded man's recovery. He gave the innkeeper 2 silver coins and said, "Take care of him. Should you need to spend more than this, I will repay you on my way back." In this small yet significant act, he entrusted not only money, but his care and hope in the hands of another. A simple gesture that would ripple outwards in compassion.
When the Samaritan brought a wounded Jew to my inn, I was taken aback. It is not every day that such a scene unfolds. I hesitated at first. After all, a Samaritan caring for a Jew is not what we are used to. But the sincerity in his eyes convinced me. I accepted the coins not merely as payment, but as a promise of trust. I decided to do my part, however small, in this act of mercy. It is in these moments of trust and cooperation that our shared humanity is revealed.
Finally, Jesus gathers his listeners and returns to the question posed to the scholar. Which of these 3, in your opinion, was neighbor to the robber's victim? The scholar answers, "The one who treated him with mercy." And Jesus replies, "Go and do likewise."
I told this parable because you asked, "Who is my neighbor?" My answer is simply, a neighbor is anyone in need. I challenge you to see beyond boundaries, to embrace mercy, even when it disturbs your comfort. True love is radical. It breaks down barriers, challenges old prejudices, and calls you to act. We ask, does this person need help? Then we help them. If they need food, we feed them. If they are lonely, we visit them. If they need our help, we care for them. At the Last Supper, I will wash the feet of my disciples. I will ask them to imitate me, and I will give you a new commandment. Love another as I have loved you. Go and do likewise.